What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Jesse Cofield holding it down for us in the DraftKings studio out there in Boston. We got a great show for you guys today. As always, we hope you download, subscribe, rate, review us, leave us a 5-star rating, and check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKingsNetwork.com, YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and more. Amin Elhassan, the other half of Oddball, with Charlotte Wilder and Amin Elhassan, going to join us today since we have a ton of NBA news going on right now, including the biggest bit of news, Dad, the coaching change for the Milwaukee Bucks. Adrian Griffin out after posting a 30-13 record for one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference after a season that, Dad, and I think this is one of those things we know, given the talent where Milwaukee's always going to be, they're second in the Eastern Conference right now, but then you start to look under the hood a little bit more, and the defense has been a concern the whole year, and you've sort of seen little tremors building to this. And so while it might feel sudden if people weren't paying attention, this is by no means something that happened out of nowhere.
No. And it's a guy who's in Griffin, who was a longtime NBA coach. I think played 9 years in the NBA as well as a player. I think 16 years as a coach, was with the Raptors, and comes over. And we all know the offseason. We talked about it. You know, Giannis making kind of some noise of, hey, are we going in the right direction? They get Dame Lillard, to be the guy with them, and they're sitting second in the conference now. So you think everything is hunky-dory. But as you mentioned, defense, there's all kind of numbers out there. Overall, they were 4th last year. They're 22nd this year. That's been slipping in, and I believe management was just of the ilk of, we want to nip this in the bud. As they're saying, we like this guy, but maybe he's not ready just yet to be a head coach, even though the team is 30-11, or 30-13, whatever it is, and being second in the conference. It seems odd, but definitely has to be you're right, a reason building. It's either there's so much going wrong in the locker room between players and coach, but you don't hear that here like you did with the Raiders. That it's more what they're talking about. The defensive side, he's a first-time head coach, that maybe at this point with the veteran team that they have and they want, and who they're competing with in the East, that they need that veteran coach. They're going after Doc Rivers, so we'll see what goes on there. I mean, the last time this happened was in 2015 with David Blatt in Cleveland.
Yep.
He was 30-11 and got fired, and that team went on that year to win the title. So, we'll see if Milwaukee follows suit there.
One, I think that's the thought process, is when you've got a team that's talented enough to make a run, you get to make decisions with the margins in mind. They're not a team that was cratering by any means, but kind of similar to the David Blatt situation, Dad. Remember, that was all tied to respect, right? David Blatt had this stellar resume from another league across the seas, right, and came over and expected immediately this Cleveland Cavaliers team to lock in and respect what he had to say, despite the fact that they were all further and longer tenured in this particular league than he was, and you've got LeBron James on your team that adds to all that. And so there was just this feeling that he never really gelled with the locker room. And Dad, it kind of feels like the same situation here. Like, I can understand this move from the Milwaukee Bucks because because you have Giannis very publicly prodding the organization in one direction, and you've got a very clear directive in terms of what success and failure is for you, and that's, are you getting your star player closer to the championship that's going to keep him happy enough to stay here long term? And if the answer was no, then you got to go, because, Dad, you can go all the way back to the in-season tournament this year where the Milwaukee Bucks lost to the Indiana Pacers, who went on to the finals, and then apparently had kind of a come-to-Jesus meeting there where, among others, Bobby Portis, one of the veteran voices on that team, and a guy who does not seem like the dude you want to be on the opposing end of, basically called out Adrian Griffin, saying, hey, we need to have a better plan in what we're going to do late in these games, offensively, defensively. And you only, I think, Dad, especially early on when you're a coach trying to set the standard, you only get so many chances to show your team you're capable of this before all of a sudden, in critical moments, a group that's got championship experience is all of a sudden going to start asking questions about if you're the right one for the job and if everyone's time's being wasted towards their ultimate goal.
Yeah, a couple things, too. I talked about their defense falling off. Remember, they did trade away Drew Holiday. That has something to do with it as well, for the defense going down. But also, was it not, it's revisionist history now, but you look back on it, you say, a veteran team like this with the obvious championship aspirations to hire a first-time head coach, right? Does that seem odd now? Again, it's bad to look back and say that now. I'm sure people were saying it then. Remember, we replaced Mike Budenholzer. And John Horst, the GM, just basically said, someday, we believe he can develop into a really good NBA coach, but not fitting the timeline. For Milwaukee, well, I mean, wouldn't that be the thought process before you hired him of saying, first time, that would seem like the perfect team for a veteran head coach, right? That's been kind of through the battles instead of a first-year head coach.
Well, and remember, I think that was so. One of the other fissure points in all of this was what happened with Terry Stotts early in the season, right? Terry Stotts, who had been the coach of the Portland Trailblazers for a lot of Dame's career there, was brought on to be an assistant for this team and was supposed to be in charge of a lot of the offensive stuff. And apparently there had been a dust-up between him and Adrian Griffin during the preseason, which led to Stotts resigning after they got done with the preseason in a move that I think already kind of piqued a lot of eyebrows for people because of what that meant. Because, Dad, we see this all the time. If you're going to have a young coach that's kind of trying to come up and maybe be a little bit ahead of schedule, what do? You surround him with veteran assistants who have head coaching experience, who can kind of help walk him through that. And in that case, too, you made the big swing, or we're going to make the big swing for Dame Lillard to try and satisfy Giannis Antetokounmpo. And now all of a sudden you lose a voice that was integral in that. That's a big chip to all of a sudden have taken off the table really early in the process.
Yeah. So they look into Doc Rivers is supposedly the guy they have their sights set on. Talk about Doc Rivers having a little bit of leverage here. Hey, you want me quickly? Well, you can pay for it. It's a good time to kind of leverage what you want, but obviously want to go now for a veteran coach.
Yeah, Doc Rivers, who I believe, and I saw this in an article in The Athletic by Sam Amick and then Eric Nem, that said, according to league sources, I believe Doc Rivers had begun to serve as an informal consultant to Adrian Griffin at behest of the Bucks back in May. So I think that's why you saw this name immediately rise to the top of the pile. Obviously, veteran coach doing the media gig right now, calling games, and we see this a lot where guys will kind of just go to that to stay close and keep some irons in the fire in terms of their coaching pedigree. But Dad, Doc Rivers, it seems like I don't know, now exists in meme form, where if you're thinking about this team's long-term forecast, it seems primed to lose a Game 7 in the postseason in dramatic fashion, as has been basically the Doc Rivers life cycle sans one championship season. So I'll be interested to talk to Amin about that, who has obviously got some funny opinions about Doc Rivers from the past, but he does, I guess, in terms of what's available right now, which is what you're working with, for the Milwaukee Bucks, he's got some familiarity with your organization. If he's been consulting, he's kind of been peeking under the hood. It sort of winds up being, albeit in a very different manner, what happened with Jeff Saturday and the Indianapolis Colts, where he had been consulting for that team when they decided to make a move and brought him in. Now, he had no prior head coaching experience in the NFL. Doc Rivers is obviously very decorated, but he at least has that familiarity with this current team and what their strengths and weaknesses and needs are.
And then how about Joe Prunty? He takes over. He's the habitual interim head coach. It's his third time being an interim head coach, including in Milwaukee when Jason Kidd got fired back in 2018. So he'll head over that team until they probably sign Doc Rivers. All arrows are pointing that way. So we'll see.
All right, so it's going to be very interesting. We'll talk to Amin plenty about this as we get going along. Dad, I did want to revisit this because we had an interesting situation pop up in the NBA last night. The Portland Trailblazers protesting their loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder last night. Chauncey Billups, their head coach, with a 109-108 lead, claims that he was calling a timeout on the sideline before the referee whistled the double dribble on their guard Malcolm Brogdon with 15 seconds left in the fourth quarter. And because of that, Billups angrily responded. They were given, he was assessed 2 technical fouls, and the ensuing result led to Oklahoma City winning that game. Now, I saw in the pool report after the officials came out and basically said, hey, our official did the right thing. Your job is to referee the play there. He had a double team going on in front of him, and so he refereed that and then got to the timeout and didn't get to it in time. But, Dad, I guess first and foremost, in seeing anything with this play, do you have a problem with it, and do you expect now anything to change here after they filed the protest on this game?
I love it too. It's a $10,000 to file a protest.
Right.
I was waiting to hear non-refundable, but if you win the protest, you do get your money back.
Treat it like a challenge where you get to wager it essentially.
Yes, exactly. So here's what I don't understand here. We know referees in football cover certain areas of the field, correct? So. And I understand what they're saying because, again, Chauncey Billups is coming up from behind where the play is going on. It's crossed half court, and he's on the other side of the court. So picture him coming up toward the ref, but the ref's back is to him because he's looking at the player with the ball. He's starting to get attacked with the ball, and he goes to do the double dribble, but Chauncey Billups is calling timeout. And the ref is not looking at him, and I get it. Because he's watching the play. What I don't understand is there's 3 refs on the court. There's the ref that was there. There's a ref under the basket. And if you look directly on the other side across from Chauncey Billups, there's another official. Are they not allowed to say, I saw him calling timeout? That I honestly don't know. I mean, he was standing there looking at the play, but because he's across the court, his view is a lot wider than the ref who's watching the individual play. He had to see Chauncey Billups calling timeout. If he didn't, I would be stunned from where he was standing. So I guess that would be my thought is, does that official nearest have to be the one? I can't imagine he has to be the one to call a timeout, right? I would think if any official sees the timeout signal, you call timeout. I don't know that for a fact, but I'm assuming, and I know you shouldn't assume. So that would be my biggest question. I get why the ref didn't hear him or see him. He was busy calling the play, understood. But what about the ref directly across the court? Why couldn't he say, yes, he was calling timeout?
No, it's a good call. And officials, I always tell people after having gone through the process one time, officiates one game. I was a guest referee at the South Carolina spring game and got to kind of learn about the mechanics of all this stuff. And you learn being a referee is just like being a member of the football team, where you know where your eyes are supposed to be on any given play, and you know who you're supposed to be helping on any given play in that spot. So I don't know if he had help or backup in that spot. It's a good question, and I'm sure we'll find out because of this. Now, it is an uphill battle here. There's not been often, according to ESPN Stats and Info, that the NBA has actually upheld protests. It's only happened 6 times. And this was the interesting part to me, Dag. I had forgotten about this. The last time it happened involved the Phoenix Suns and the Atlanta Hawks. So the Hawks were playing the Suns in Atlanta on December 19th of 2007. And at the end of that game during overtime, Shaquille O'Neal was playing for the Miami Heat at that point. Got fouled, his 6th foul of the night with 51.9 seconds left in the game, and he got sat down after that. Al Horford hit a pair of free throws to put the Hawks up 114-111, and then that was it. They ended up winning that game 117-111, but after they went back and found out that actually one of the fouls attributed to Shaq was on Udonis Haslem, who just got his jersey retired, and so they said because of that error, the next time the two teams played, they were going to replay the final 51.9 seconds that that were supposed to have happened after that mistake happened. And Dad, in that time that had happened, after the original game, Alonzo Mourning had been the final game of his career because he suffered a knee injury while trying to block a shot, and Shaquille O'Neal had been traded at that point from the Heat to the Phoenix Suns, and so Sean Marion, who made his way over, actually became, and this is according to Shea Serrano, did a great history of this on The Ringer. As part of that trade, Sean Marion now became one of only a handful of players to officially be credited with having played for two different NBA teams on the same night, because that game went back and retroactively counted to the game that they had played before.
That's amazing that this was all about Shaq, and Shaq ends up being traded before they replay the game. Hawks won it, and it ended up going to overtime. And Hawks won in overtime, 114-111. But yeah, that was the last time. And as you mentioned, it only happened 6 times before. I don't know what's going to happen here. They obviously have the view easily of, is he calling timeout, or is he calling timeout before the double dribble? And if he is, then what happens? Because I can absolutely see the NBA saying, well, dude is looking at the play, the official right there, the referee, so he's not seeing or hear you call a timeout. But I'll continue to say, my question is, what about the guy across the court, the referee across the court, seeing him call timeout? Does that come into play at all? I don't know. We're going to find out.
We will find out, but in the meantime, Jesse, let's get to one more bit of NBA news involving, of all teams, the Miami Heat, like we just talked about.
Yeah, so they acquired Charlotte Hornets guard Terry Rozier for guard Kyle Lowry and a protected 2027 first-round pick on Tuesday. So, guys, looks good for the Heat, right? Okay, landing a gifted scoring guard. He's having one of his best NBA seasons, averaging 23.2 points, 6.6 assists a game. So how do we feel about this? Heat are 24-19, 6th in the Eastern Conference. Do we feel like Rozier can give them, sort of be that dynamic guard, help them make a playoff run? What do we think?
Yeah, I mean, Dad, I think it's twofold, right? A little bit of jolt of offense with somebody new in there, and then getting rid of a bad expiring contract for you. Kyle Lowry was going to be in the final year with due a $29.6 million as a 37-year-old. So the fact that you were able to get something in return for an expiring contract like that, save yourself some money, all seems to be a net positive, even though I saw our guy Mike Ryan over at the Le Batard show absolutely beside himself, because in his terms, it was his least favorite player being traded for his second least favorite player to try and get something going offensively for the Heat.
Listen, Lowry was averaging 8 points a game. Rozier's having the season of his career right now, as Jesse mentioned, at 23 points. So you'd think there'd be some kind of swing on offense. And for Charlotte, they're working the money system, right? Lowry's not going to play for Charlotte. You know, he'll end up somewhere else. They have other expiring contracts that they're going to kind of dump. They're basically going to build off a couple of people, including LaMelo Ball on that team, and they're going for their 8th straight season of failing to reach the postseason. So basically, it's going to be LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller, the number 2 pick in last year's draft, who they're going to kind of build around. They're not calling it. Mitch Kupchak's running that team now. They're not calling it a complete rebuild, because they said, that's completely starting over. We have some veterans and young players that we're going to kind of build around as cornerstones. So it's just branding and wording right there as they try and, dig themselves out of as we mentioned, the longest streak in the NBA of not making the postseason of 8 years.
I feel like instead of, because you're right, we have all of these like words that people like to use around what their team's long-term plan is. We're not rebuilding, we're reloading. It's not a full-on teardown. We're not tanking, but we're pivoting. There are all these different words. It just needs to be a system like Fogo de Chao, where you go to for anyone that hasn't been, the Brazilian steakhouse, where they just it's a parade of meat. They just bring it around to your table and they shave it off there. And Dad, as you know, you got the little token on your table. And one side's green and one side's red. And when you got the green side up, it means I would like as much meat as humanly possible. And when the red side's up, it's I can't physically eat any more meat right now. I'm going to die. And so that's just how it be here. For a team, it should either be, hey, green side up or red side up. Or, hey, the Charlotte Hornets, red side up right now. Not very good. We're not going to be very good. We're working on ourselves right now. We're doing the therapy. Green side up, we're going for a championship right now. So you'd have Bucks green side up in their move, Charlotte Hornets red side up in their move, and be done with the words.
And Miami's sitting in the 6th slot right now. I mean, and we'll ask Amin this. Do we think anybody outside of Boston, Milwaukee, and Philly, are going to compete. Now, the teams are close. Cleveland's just, I think, 2.5 away from Philly. The Knicks are in the 5 slot, Miami in the 6 slot, 9.5 back from Boston. So there are teams obviously in range, but man, those 3 teams at the top just look like the teams to beat.
It's felt like an upper crust there for a while, and I'm with you. There's been moments from this Cleveland Cavaliers roster who's been rock solid, and Donovan Mitchell there and the job that they've done, but it does feel like that side has a little bit more of a defined group, and they're the cores that have been around there for a while. It's the same teams that we've been talking about near the top of the Eastern Conference for God knows how long at this point, because again, like we mentioned with Charlotte yesterday, in a league where injury is a lot less of a factor and the superstars are pretty well known, when it's consistent across the board, you kind of know what to expect. Unless, of course, you were talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. So coming up next, we will welcome in Amin Elhassan from the Oddball Podcast. Try and figure out why now for Adrian, Griffin, and the Milwaukee Bucks, and if Doc Rivers can really be the answer to a lot of their questions down the home stretch. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Very excited to welcome in. We have the other half of Oddball on all the time in Charlotte Wilder, so I'm glad that we're getting Amin Elhassan on here to help try and smarten us up here as well. Tons of NBA news to get to right now, and mercifully, Amin is on the East Coast down in Miami with the Levitard crew and not at home where he normally is at the ass crack of dawn. So what's going on, Amin? How you doing, man?
I'm all right, man. I feel like I need a background that has like a tennis racket and a football and a baseball. Yeah. Isn't that what Charlotte usually has?
Yeah, she does.
Incredibly sportsy background usually. So we'll let it go. Miami Hotel is also Miami Hotel is also a good aesthetic here, but we probably need the basketballs right now. So Adrian Griffin fired yesterday by the Milwaukee Bucks. I mean, a lot of people have pointed out the points along the way where they saw things might not be quite right, but why ultimately do you think this decision was made now?
I think in professional sports, there's a moment where a coach loses the locker room, and it doesn't matter if you were Red Auerbach, Eric Spoelstra, Phil Jackson all rolled into one. If you've lost the locker room, it doesn't matter. Yes, your job is to know X's and O's. Yes, your job is to do lineups and substitutions. Yes, your job is to also manage upward to your GM and to your owner. But a big part of the job is making those 17 guys in that locker room follow you. And if they don't follow you, I don't care how good you are at everything else, it doesn't matter. And for the Bucs, I think they looked at it and they said, our record right now is deodorant over someone who hasn't showered in 4 months. It makes us look, we have the second best record in the league. What could be? We have the same record as the defending champs, the Nuggets. But we know this team is not following this guy. And so rather than extend this, they made what I would say the tough decision, but it's probably the right decision to let him go.
Along those lines, and not to do revisionist history, but when this hire was made, was there any talk in the basketball world of why is a veteran team like this, who has such championship aspirations, who's one of the best players in the league, hiring a first-time head coach?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike. And the timeline is fuzzy now because we just say Damian Lillard, Giannis Antetokounmpo, of course they're going for a championship. But back when he was hired, remember, Giannis hadn't signed his extension, so it was kind of iffy. Damian Lillard was not even on the radar. Chris Middleton was a free agent. There was a big feeling that this might be a season of change or transition in Milwaukee. And so there was a lot of let's see what we got here. There were other, I guess you could say, more veteran options on the market. Those guys got eaten up real quickly. Nick Nurse was a guy that was interviewing here, interviewing there, and then Philly offered. He's like, I'm gone. I'm not even going to wait to see, because as you guys know, there's only 30 of these jobs. So if you have a solid offer, you don't say, hold on, let me see what these guys over here are going to do who have all this uncertainty. So at the time, the hire, maybe it was a little while. They gave it to a first-time head coach, but Adrian Griffin is a guy who played in the league a long time and then been an assistant a long time and interviewed, I believe he said 14 times. So it wasn't quite out of left field. I would say the first signs of, wait a second, what's happening here, happened in training camp when he had this big public argument in front of the team with his lead assistant, Terry Stotts, and ended with Terry Stotts basically resigning and leaving the team. And I mean, there is kind of like a tradition in the NBA that when you are a first-time head coach, your lead assistant is an old hand who's done it before. He's been there, he's done that, kind of to help you ease your way in. If you think of Steve Kerr, when he was a first-time head coach in Golden State, he had Alvin Gentry, had been a long-time head coach in the league, as his lead assistant. So this is something that is typical and natural. And, out the gate, Adrian Griffin is fighting with his lead assistant. That's not a great sign.
So now it leads to this point where they're discussing a veteran option replacement, and Doc Rivers immediately became the name most associated with this. What does Doc Rivers do for this team at this point? I mean, is that something just best available, or is he actually someone that can be a net positive fitting in with this team?
So this is the wild part, Gojo. Doc Rivers, after the Bucs lost in the in-season tournament semifinal to the Pacers, Doc Rivers was brought in by the Bucs to be a consultant to help kind of guide Adrian Griffin in the way that Terry Stotts was supposed to, but obviously wasn't there anymore. And so there is a weird thing of hey, my ex is now dating my friend who I bought around a few months ago. There's a little tension there. Counterpoint, Doc, first of all, what Doc comes in even without that is he comes in with credibility. I thought Shaq talked about this great last night on TNT. There's a level of credibility that players respond to and instantly when you walk in the door. And so Doc, having won a championship, having coached veteran teams, and having known his voice, and that's really important for first-time coach versus veteran coach. Veteran coach walks in and says, we're doing this. This is how we're running. This is what we're calling these plays over here. This is the defensive coverages. We're calling them this, and this. He's got clear ideas of what he wants to do. A first-time head coach, no matter how long he's been an assistant coach, it's his first time in the kitchen. So he's like, little salt? Maybe needs more salt. Oh, maybe too much salt. Let me add some more. You're doing that as a first-time head coach, inevitably. And so for Doc to come in and he's going to have a clear vision and a clear plan, these guys are going to buy in. They're going to buy in because of who he is and the resume he brings. But also, he's got some inner knowledge. It's not like a guy walking off the street. It's not like, for instance, if Mark Jackson had been hired, Mark Jackson knows nothing about the internal workings of the Bucs. He'd be walking in just as green as anyone else. But Doc has an inside scoop because of the meetings and the stuff he did a month ago after the in-season tournament.
Other NBA news going on, trade deadline February 8th, but we had a trade. Terry Rozier goes from Charlotte to Miami. Kyle Lowry, who will never, I'm sure, play for Charlotte, little expiring contract there. Rozier's having a career year, averaging over 23 points. They're sitting in the 6th slot. You're down there in Miami. What does this do for the Heat?
I think it does a lot of things. First of all, you're right. Kyle Lowry will probably be traded before the deadline, and he won't even get to expire. If he doesn't get traded, they'll just buy him out, and he'll end up somewhere, maybe Philadelphia, maybe New York. We'll wait to see. But as far as what Rozier does for the Heat, first of all, he gives them another point of contact defensive player. Rozier made his bones in this league as a defensive on-ball guard. And then he had kind of had aspirations of being more, and he ends up signing this deal in Charlotte, and he got to shoot as much as he wanted and not care about defense so much. And that was great, but after a while, you get tired of losing. So he comes in, he gives them someone at the point of dribble who is a great defensive player, much better at least than Kyle Lowry. And then the other thing is offensively, he gives them a spark. This is a team that has struggled. It's in the middle of the pack offensively, even when all their guys are healthy. This is a team that offensively in the half-court struggles. So Terry Rozier gives them not only another shooting option, it's a great three-point shooter, but another guy who can create his own offense. But I don't expect him to be 23 points per game, Terry Rozier. I expect him to be much more focused on the defensive end and an offensive spark when they need it.
Are you going to be there to console Mike Ryan this morning? Because he seemed really beside himself about this trade.
I've been texting with him in a group chat all night, and but this is the Mike Ryan way. Everything they do, he kind of he thumbs down, and he kind of throws a pity party, and then sometime in the future he'll be like, "Oh my God, that worked out great." It's happened so many times I can't even count.
Man, the way he acts, you think he's a Jet fan, right? I mean, he's just so negative all the time.
He's learned from Stu Gatz.
Hanging around Stu too much.
It's the same vibe for sure, except the success is there for Miami and not for the Jets.
Yeah. By the way, that whole thing where they actually win games consistently and end up in championship settings, all of that. Amin, we appreciate the time this morning, man. Super helpful, great stuff as always. Everyone, check out Oddball, Amin Elhassan, Charlotte Wilder. Awesome show every day but Monday here on the DraftKings Network. Appreciate it, man.
That's our tagline: every day but Monday. And the weekend.
It's a good deal. 3-day weekend every weekend. You guys were a smart show. I don't know what the hell we were thinking.
How did I not think of that?
That's what you guys are thinking too early. What is it? GoJo, you're in LA, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Believe me, that's a huge miscalculation on my part. So too early and then too many days of the weekend here. We need to go to the European model of podcasting and show hosting where it's just 4 days a week.
Bonjour.
Yeah, I blame myself. I've been in this business for a few decades. I should have known better, so I'll try and learn. So thank you for the guidance. We'll try and get that in our next deal.
Thanks a lot, guys.
There we go. Exactly. Lou, I hope you're listening right now. This is good stuff that you can be writing down for the next contract here. Coming up next, as we pivot away from the NBA, a lot of coaching moves being talked about there, but we're getting very close to maybe the biggest domino in the NFL head coaching cycle finally getting ready to fall out here in Los Angeles.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. We've got some coaching news. According to Mike Garofalo of NFL Media, the Chargers and Michigan coach Jim Harbaugh are within striking distance of getting a deal done. Garofalo went on to say that the Chargers have made an extremely strong financial offer. They're at the point now where they're discussing personnel, staffing issues, general manager, who might be joining him on the staff. So, Gojo, you've said from the get-go that he's not staying at Michigan, that he's going to be moving on. So what do we think about the Chargers being the potential landing spot here, or apparently the landing spot?
Yeah, this seems like what's been the simplest solution all along, right, Dad? You and I on the old show at ESPN used to talk about Occam's razor a lot. The simplest solution is usually the easiest course of action type deal. And from the beginning, it was, all right, Jim Harbaugh in a sea of quality candidates this year was the most compelling candidate in my mind in terms of what he could afford your team, the timeline you could have because of his age, his NFL experience. And the Chargers, while there are flaws with that roster and with that organization, have the one sure thing at quarterback of the teams available on the market right now. And so this seemed like the marriage that we all expected. Jim Harbaugh had history as a player with this team, and so now would get to go back here and answer the most important question in football before he ever gets in the building of who's going to be under center for him.
So this was the biggest no-brainer of putting a coach with a team, but you see he took an interview with the Atlanta Falcons too, just to let the Chargers know, I got other suitors out there to help up that price a little bit, and there's nothing wrong with that. Remember, it was last year, I think it was Belichick led at $20 million, then Sean Payton $18 million, Pete Carroll $15 million. We know Harbaugh is going to be in there, right? I mean, he's going to be making at least 15. He has to, probably more than that. So he's going to get a broke off for himself there, and he's going to have the best quarterback of the teams available. So this was about the easiest. If he wanted to leave college and come to the NFL, this was where he was going to go, barring them setting some parameters of money or people he could bring in, which if you're going to sign Jim Harbaugh, you're not going to have parameters like that. You're going to let him do what he wants to do.
Yeah, this is going to be like the scene at the end of The Wedding Singer. And since we let our first-class passengers do pretty much whatever they want, here is Robbie Hart. And part of that is going to include the assistants, Dad, which I think is interesting because Jim Harbaugh's always been someone that people associate with quarterbacks, going back to obviously his time with Andrew Luck at Stanford. But really outside of that, and then you had, Alex Smith and giving way to Colin Kaepernick in San Francisco when they made their run there. And that's why the name that came up for offensive coordinator wasn't super surprising. I saw one account, Aaron Wilson, tweeting that potentially Jim Harbaugh's staff, per league sources, could look like it includes offensive coordinator Greg Roman, who was most recently with the Baltimore Ravens and was pushed out of there because people didn't think he developed the downfield passing game enough for Lamar Jackson. That part, I'm not going to lie, Dad, scares me a little bit on offense when we know what Greg Roman's MO is, which is incredibly creative run game with an athletic quarterback that Justin Herbert certainly qualifies, but I think is not what we've all been pining for with him, a guy we want to see push the ball down the field a little bit more. So that one a little concerning to me. And then Jesse Minter was the other name I floated there, the defensive coordinator that was with him at Michigan this last year. And Dad, I have a situation I want to throw in front of you that someone tweeted at me the other day. If you're Jesse Minter and you've got a history with both Jim Harbaugh and his brother John, Jesse Minter, before he went to Michigan, cut his teeth with John Harbaugh as a part of the Ravens organization. Mike McDonald, probably going to be a head coach for somebody else this offseason here. If you're Jesse Minter and you've got both Harbaughs with job openings at defensive coordinator, one with the Los Angeles Chargers, one with the Baltimore Ravens, I'd imagine he'd be in demand for both. Like, I don't know what the bartering system is like amongst Harbaughs, but if I'm Jesse Minter, the objectively better opportunity would they want, and I'd imagine they would want him for it, would be out in Baltimore if that job comes loose.
Not even close. I mean, and Jim couldn't be like, Jesse, what are you doing? If you go, with John to Baltimore, Jesse would just be like, you see the two defenses here? I mean, you're asking me which one I want to work with? I mean, you're handed one of the top defense, if not the top defense in the NFL. If it goes that way, if McDonald gets a head coaching job, yeah, I could easily see it leaning that way. Understood completely. But let's remember the domino. And quickly, he's talking about Jim would take his son, Jay, who was, I believe, an assistant special teams coach or something at Michigan, keep him there. But the other side of that, remember, it's all a domino effect. Ward Manuel, the AD for Michigan, I'm sure has to be, while maybe looking calm up top, has got to be, the duck feet underwater. They're trying to say, okay, I got to make sure I have, my dominoes in place if this is going to happen. So you have to imagine he is ready to make a move or inquiring whether they're going to hire from within with Sharon or whether they're going to go outside somewhere and what they're going to do, because it all needs to happen quickly, or quicker than it's going on. These spots need to be filled, because then there is the domino effect that goes on of the place that coach leaves that has to find one. So everybody is kind of preparing their lists.
There is part of me that could galaxy brain a belief that Jim Harbaugh, in his never-ending loyalty, would drag this process on long enough into the offseason to ensure that Michigan really had no other choice but to elevate Sharon Moore to the head coach, which I think they would have done anyway. Like, it's just part of me, because it's Jim Harbaugh and because this has seemed like the team we associated with him right from the jump, and this is dragged on in a way that kind of seems a bit much. But Sharon Moore, I think, was always going to be the choice there. For anyone unfamiliar, he's been the offensive line coach there for a number of years under Jim Harbaugh. He's been the offensive coordinator for the last 2 years, and he had one interim head coaching game during the 3-game suspension to start the season, where Jim Harbaugh let a number of assistants go into the head chair, go and be the head voice for the week. And then down the stretch of the season, when the Big Ten suspended Jim Harbaugh for the final 3 games of the regular season, Sharon Moore was the acting head coach for all 3 of those games, and I thought acquitted himself incredibly well, not just in the offense that we know was a juggernaut going through Big Ten play, had Blake Corum, had J.J. McCarthy, had an offensive line that had won the Joe Moore Award for best O-line in college that he coached for the last 2 years, but also, Dad, situationally, the 4th down decisions, the way he managed end-of-game stuff there, I thought he was incredibly comfortable and aggressive in that role, where Jim Harbaugh, he was there to coach during the week, couldn't help him on game day, couldn't do a damn bit about that. And so I said back then, I forget after which game it was, Sharon Moore's a star, he's going to be someone's head coach at some point. And I think we've seen the love that he has for Jim Harbaugh, the loyalty he has to that program. I think if Jim makes this jump, that's going to be rewarded. And if you're Michigan, that's fortunate, because in a day and age in college football where we see when you pull a coach out, the chaos that can ensue in the portal and the things that go on, there might still be some of that because Jim Harbaugh is that important to his team and program. But I think with some continuity for recruits that have been around Sharon Moore and for guys on that roster, that's going to be important for trying to keep the band together as much as you can coming off that championship.
Yeah, and what other coaches that Jim may take as well that Sharon would have to fill. But I agree. You look at Antonio Pierce, how he did as an interim coach. Sharon did the same thing, and Pierce got the job, and I think Sharon would deserve that shot as well. And I agree. I think that's the way it would go.
I do think that's a good reminder too, Dad. You brought up Antonio Pierce, and we talk about all the time the difficulty that minority candidates have in the hiring process, both college and pro, and how important those interim reps are. This conversation came up a lot last year when Jeff Saturday got the job in Indianapolis and was essentially given half a season to audition. Is you get not only real-time experience, but sort of like we talked about this with the Indiana Pacers making the trade at the deadline to bring in, why am I blanking on the name right now? Who do the Pacers just trade for? Pascal Siakam, who's going to be a free agent coming up. You get a chance to make your sales pitch with him in-house. You get a chance to do all that in person. You get a lead in front of everyone else. When you're a guy that gets that interim tag for a while, you get a chance to show your bosses, not on some PowerPoint presentation, not with some binder full of stuff, but day in and day out how you're going to deal with the people and manage the situation in that building. And it is incredibly valuable. So I can understand why that's such a point of contention for people.
Yeah, and these dominoes are going to have to start falling, right? I mean, we're going to have to start getting some of these going. Some of these teams are going to get the guy they want. Others aren't. They got to go down the list. The Belichick situation gets even more interesting as well in Atlanta. But eventually, these things are going to have to start to happen.
Yeah, apparently the Atlanta Falcons and Bill Belichick, after some heavy petting, are now cooling off a little bit and taking some time for themselves. And you're right. I think it's once Jim Harbaugh is off the table, because I think for a lot of jobs, he was the candidate you wanted to try and swing for. And once that's done, everyone else, sans the Titans who already made their decision with Brian Callahan, everyone else is going to start to slot in after that. Coming up next, I want to take a look ahead to the weekend because we have got something that hasn't happened in a long time, which presents a great opportunity to embarrass me and my dad for being bad at trivia.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The Lions are in the NFC Championship for just the second time in franchise history and the first time since 1991. They're going to look to punch their ticket to their first Super Bowl on Sunday against the 49ers. Now, back in 1991, Junior, you were only 2. Senior, you were 29 and playing for the Eagles. So in honor of Lions fans getting to enjoy watching their team try to reach the Super Bowl for the first time in over 30 years, we figured we would take this opportunity to do some trivia and see what else Lions fans we were enjoying back then. I was only 1, so I wasn't enjoying much. Here's how it's going to work, okay? I'm going to ask each of you a question, go back and forth. If the first person doesn't get it right, we go to the other. So we're going to start with Senior. Senior, if you don't get the question, GoJo will have a chance to answer it. You got about 30-ish seconds to talk it out or think about it. So whoever has the most points at the end of the segment will win. Pretty straightforward. Shall we start?
Well, and this should be stacked against me because, again, my father was a sentient adult at that point, and I was probably still crapping my pants. So, Dad, you should have this.
Probably, definitely, you were too.
You were. You definitely were. You were. It was amazing. It took you till about 5 to get potty trained. We were a little stunned at that.
Listen, I had you guys to help clean up the act. I don't know why kids give up pooping their pants when you've got willing participants who are just going to bathe you and clean it all up. You're not going to let me sit there in my own funk all day.
Let me just say, we're not willing, okay? We have to do it. We're not willing to do it. And this trivia contest, Jess, is going to go like me and my brother Bob having a sack contest. Every year we'd have a contest who'd get more sacks. And if somebody got 1, it was a commanding lead. We may not get any here.
Okay.
But let's go.
There's a couple that I think you'll be able to get, okay? So let's start. First question, Senior, you're going to begin. The album Nevermind by this band sold over 11 million copies in the U.S.
Seriously? I mean, 1991, so I can just go groups then. I'm U2, Queen, Guns N' Roses.
You can't just name a bunch of answers. You got to pick one answer.
Well,
Did she say I had time to talk it through?
Yeah, 30 seconds.
I'm talking it through.
Yep.
Metallica. Huh.
I feel like you're saying the name and then looking at Jesse for a reaction and trying to cheat the system right now.
If he says it, I'm going to give it to him.
I have no idea. I don't know. I'm saying
okay,
U2.
All right.
Okay, I get to tap in, right?
Yes, Junior, go ahead.
What is Nirvana?
Correct. Ding, ding, ding.
Let's go.
Okay, moving on to number 2, a commanding lead. GoJo has a commanding lead. Final episode of the soap opera aired after 14 seasons, GoJo.
I feel like I'm just gonna spin the wheel of soap operas that I know the names of. All My Children?
No, incorrect.
I mean, I watched All My Children in General Hospital, so I don't, and I know it's neither one of them. Okay. I'll just throw out another one. I know Days of Our Lives. I don't know.
All right. No, neither of you know it. Neither of you know it.
No.
All right. So now either of you can shout out the answer. If you get it, I'll give you a clue. It is named after a city in the United States of America.
Oh my God! I mean that doesn't help.
No. You got another clue?
Okay, and no point awarded. It was Dallas. Both of you lose.
Oh.
Okay.
Honestly, yeah.
Never
would have
gone
Dallas.
there in a million years. See, I think that's bogus. Soap opera, it's you said soap opera.
Yeah.
That's a nighttime show. Soap opera's during the day.
I don't
like that question.
I didn't write the questions, so
right.
I'm just.
I
wow.
protest. Like
Immediately
Portland,
throwing our producers under the bus.
Yeah.
like Portland, I protest that question.
Not my turnover. No points awarded. Okay, question 3. Senior.
Yes.
I hope you get this one. This popular brand started using the slogan, the quicker picker upper.
Oh, Bounty.
Yeah.
I love the sayings and jingles and all that. That's Bounty, the quicker picker upper.
Yeah. Okay, we're all tied up, 1-1.
Okay.
All right,
Yeah.
Junior. This was the top grossing movie starring Arnold Schwarzenegger of this year.
Ooh. It's like Arnold's so sneaky old, and I'm gonna
It's what
try not
you
to.
think, kind of.
Is it Predator?
No, it's not Predator.
No, it's not Predator. Here's Here's where I don't know. It's going to be Terminator, but I don't know which Terminator.
That's why I said
yeah.
it's what you think,
Yeah.
but kind of.
Terminator.
Terminator 2 Judgment Day.
Yes, Junior.
I said 2 first. I said 2 first.
I said it
just
louder
said
and I
2.
gave the full title.
No.
He gave.
I want,
all right.
No, I want the judges on that. I said 2 first. Play the tape back.
The judges are saying we get a half point for each. Okay, so you split that one. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Question 5. The year's #1 song, sung by a Canadian musician, and was the single for a Kevin Costner movie released that year. Senior.
All right. Well, as soon as you said Canadian, I was going to say, is it Gordon Lightfoot?
My dad's eyes lit up with the chance to talk about Gordon Lightfoot.
I did. We're going to go Alanis Morissette. I mean, I'm thinking of Rush. I'm thinking of Canadian singers or bands. I'm not going to get this. The #1 song for a Kevin Costner movie. I mean, I thought the #1 song in '91 would be like a Michael Jackson song.
Yeah.
I don't know. For lack of dragging this on, I don't know, and I'm not going to get it.
Junior.
Oh, I don't have a clue.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I had no idea either. It's Everything I Do it for you.
Oh, Bryan Adams.
Yeah, Bryan Adams. Yep.
Oh, okay. Never would
Okay.
have got that.
Okay. All right, Junior.
Everything I do.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay. You want to keep going? Okay. All right.
I do it for you.
Okay. Yeah, it was beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
What a gift.
Junior, this artist sung the Star Spangled Banner at the Super Bowl, and it was so popular, it was released as a single.
Oh, I mean, Dad, are you gonna sing? Are you gonna try and match Whitney Houston and sing this one?
Oh, let's go. Junior got the point. Whitney Houston.
Yeah. I mean, if I didn't get that, the most famous national anthem.
That's an
in the
easy
history of this
question.
nation.
I mean,
Yeah.
my God, why didn't you ask him to spell cat?
Okay, well.
Jeez.
COW.
Oh, okay. Senior, who was People Magazine's sexiest man alive?
Oh, seriously.
Who was sexy in '91? That's a great question. What did we think was sexy back then?
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
Oh, well, you just gave me that Patrick Swayze.
Yeah, that was a hint. It was a clue. You
Yeah.
got
Oh,
it.
she gave me a hint. Thank you. Thank you. I'm like, wait, is she giving me a hint?
Yes.
Oh my God,
Okay.
man, Patrick's all right. You know what, Patrick Swayze? That's a good choice. That's a good
Yeah,
choice. Patrick
yeah.
Swayze
He was-
feels like what you think of when you think of sexy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sexy. All right, number 8. Name one Nickelodeon show, Junior. You better get this. That debuted that year. You can just name one of the shows. There's multiple to choose from.
Rugrats?
Yes, correct.
Rugrats debuted in 1991?
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
Oh my God. I guess that makes
Wow.
sense because I watched it when I was a little kid, but I don't know. I felt like those shows were running still when I was, closer to the 2000s. What longevity there.
Yeah, really ran for a long time. All right, Senior, which gaming system was introduced?
Ooh.
Big gamer, right?
Which gaming system? I mean, I'm just going to say Nintendo.
Yes, it was the Super Nintendo. We'll give it to you. Producer
Okay.
Slate.
Yes.
Producer
Ooh.
Slate says you get it. Okay. All right,
Thank you.
All right.
Junior, number 10. A man found a first printing of this historical document inside the frame of a $4 painting he'd bought at a flea market. It was later sold at auction for $2.4 million.
Come on. Think
of a historical document.
Shush.
The Declaration of Independence?
Yes!
Let's go!
Could he have gotten any easier of questions? Any easier
Damn
of
you!
questions?
You give him easy one.
Okay.
Wow.
So GoJo won, right?
I protest.
GoJo won.
Think
Under
about that.
protest.
Yep.
Think
Under
about
protest.
that. I know more about a year that I was 2 years old than someone who was a grown-ass adult in that year. You should be ashamed of yourself.
Sir.
GoJo and Golic. I'm going to pretend to be a TV exec right now as we talk about last weekend's 4 NFL Divisional Round playoff games. Guys, they averaged 40 million viewers on television and digital platforms, the highest on record dating back to 1988. More people, just for reference here, watched the Bills-Chiefs than all the World Series games combined. Okay?
Jesus.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy to hear that. So as you look at these numbers, I mean, the average of these viewers is just crazy. So guys, what do you credit most for the ratings spike this season? I don't know what, because there's always chatter online, right, about like, oh, are they going to change this rule? Because like for the viewers, because for us, it's annoying to see it. But then numbers don't lie. Everybody's tuning in.
I mean, this one feels like, again, a win for those of us on the right side of history. I'm not saying she's the sole reason, but I love when these rating spikes coincide with games that Taylor Swift was at.
Yes.
Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And shout out to her for giving us the phrase dads, brads, and chads. It just rolls off the tongue now so easily, but got to be a lot of people down bad seeing that number this morning. Because, Dad, we know it was about the quarterback matchup. Mahomes and Allen is box office every single time. It's the best proven commodity in the NFL at this point in terms of arrival. But, oh, by the way, shirtless Jason Kelce and normal Taylor Swift, more than good enough to help add to this.
I mean, without question, this was going to be a monster thing. And then remember, the KC-Miami game was on Peacock, and that set a record. Probably a lot of Swifties getting a subscription for the first time on that one. Listen, this comes down to it's just the most popular sport there is in the country, and people can't get enough football. It's football, and then it's college. It's NFL, and then it's college football. It's just where we are. Think of Green Bay, San Francisco was the most watched Saturday telecast on any network since the '94 Olympics on CBS. I mean, this is what football does. It's historic on people that view it. So, I mean, I don't know anything other than to say it just continues to be the most popular sport. And they've gone through, I mean, over the time I've been in this business, the NFL has certainly gone through some things, right? Where you wonder, is this finally something that's going to dent the NFL? And it gets banged down a little bit. And you wonder, man, because some big stuff, from the concussions to domestic violence to steroids, there's some big things that have gone on, and they've gone through some tumultuous times. But at the end of the day, they come out on top. They always do. I don't know what it would take to kill the NFL. It's like a cockroach. It will always be around no matter what.
Yeah, I would say, too, with this, why we're seeing the numbers explode even more. I mean, think about at this point of the year, what you've gotten in a year that was marred by quarterback injury all the way through. You had some of the best that were on display this weekend, right? Jordan Love and the Packers being one of the storied brands in the sport. The Packers 49ers being a matchup that everyone watches, and obviously, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, two of the best at what they do in the NFL. We will get to some of that in a second after I rewatched that one yesterday. Dear God, Josh Allen, the things that he is capable of. But, Dad, I think you had marquee quarterbacks in matchups. You had brand names in matchups that people already are used to, right? We're used to the Bills and Chiefs playing in the postseason and knowing that game is going to be something great. They've got the biggest quarterback names in the sport. The Packers and 49ers feel like they've been deciding one of the entrants into the NFC Championship for the last 5 or so years and just had a different quarterback name at the helm for Green Bay. On and on down the list, I think you've got the right quarterbacks at the right time. And this weekend, you actually had good games as opposed to the wild card weekend where you had a bunch of blowouts for the most part. Now, you can exclude the Baltimore Ravens and Houston Texans from that, but by and large, the rest were all really good games.
So that was the least watched, Houston and Baltimore, but it was still the most watched ESPN game since it started doing games in 1987. And that was the least watch at just under 32 million viewers on that one. Then next, third was Green Bay, San Francisco. Then Tampa Bay, Detroit, which I wasn't sure what was, obviously with Detroit, but Tampa Bay is surprised to be there. But just Detroit, the perennial underdogs, most watched Divisional Round game on NBC since the 93 season. So, I mean, there's something for everybody, right? I mean, that's what it just turns out to be. Again, I don't know what hurts this product. God knows it's had, as I mentioned, it's had some things, but it just keeps surviving and keeps getting better and better. That's why you're going to see it streaming more because people get it. People will complain about it, but people are going to get it. You complain, but you watch. That's just the way it is with the NFL.
I was going to say part of it is a sad indictment about what we're willing to tolerate from a league that does not care about the fans that watch it by and large and really does not care at a lot of junctures about the players that play it because they know they've got us, right? They know we're addicted to violence at the core of this sport, and so they can basically do whatever they want. And you're absolutely right, Dad, for all the people that complained about streaming, the NFL knew exactly how this was going to go, and because of that, they're going to be able to leverage it into average fans having to spend more money to watch their favorite team play on a platform that's going to be able to provide the NFL with more money. That's the only thing they care about. It's amazing that the product has been able to succeed despite the fact that the people running it do not have to care about the people watching it.
Owners' meetings, I'm telling you, that there's not owners in there saying, but is this good for the fans? Is this good for the sport? It's like, how much money is going into our pocket? As I said, when you watch Charlie Brown and you hear the teacher go, want, 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 that's all owners hear until the subject gets to money and what's going in their pocket, and then their ears perk up. And listen, it's a business. They're allowed to do that. Every business, that a for-profit business is allowed to do what they need to do to make money. And along those lines, the fans have to pay more. Listen, the players, in all honesty, the rules are better for them now than when I played. It's never a safe game, but it is safer than it was when I played. It's still obviously a dangerous game. But the owners are in it, and they're all, whatever they bought their teams for and what they could sell them for, it's ridiculous the amount they make.
If you're asking, and to Dad's point, what might actually drive people away, I truly don't have an answer for what would happen.
No?
I think it would have to be years of poor quarterback play and attrition at that position that's now more accessible than ever because we stopped just letting white guys that stood in the pocket play the position. And so you've got more people that are now accessing it and are able to try and track for that growing up. But I mean, last year we literally had a player almost die on the field, and it didn't do anything to the way that people perceive the violence around this game. And so that should tell you a lot about what's going on here. The only other thing I had, Dad, before we get to some superlatives from the weekend that was, going back, the most watched game of the weekend was that Kansas City and Buffalo game. And I know we've spun that around a lot. And I saw a weird wave of Josh Allen debate online. And I don't know where you fell on this coming off the game where there were a lot of people defending it. I saw, why am I blanking on his name? Former Giants offensive lineman who works for the NFL Network now.
Sean O'Hara?
Sean O'Hara went on the NFL Network the other day and said that if you gave him a choice, even after that game of quarterbacks that he could pick from this postseason, he would take Josh Allen over even Patrick Mahomes based on what he saw there. I think that take was a little bit too spicy, but on the other side, there was a large crowd of people that were also saying, well, if Josh Allen's so good, he just needed to win the damn game. I can assure you, going back and rewatching that thing, they didn't lose that game because of Josh Allen. Like, I hate to break it to anybody there. You can feel like them running into that ceiling enough and QB win this thing through him. And we are unfair to other quarterbacks in certain regards in that way. And we all think I'd need to do better in that as a public. They didn't lose that game because of Josh Allen. I'm sorry. I just cannot go down that road. Not with the things that I saw that man do in the body of that game in key moments that weren't rewarded either by his receivers or by the special teams unit around him or by a defense that maybe had just atrophied too much because of injury to hold up. But Josh Allen, I'm sorry, does not get the blame for that loss in my book.
Listen, teams that have quarterbacks like Josh Allen are in the position they are because of their quarterbacks, even though he threw 18 interceptions this year. And for a while, it looked like their season was really going down the toilet. But one of the big reasons it didn't is because of him. Now, the running attack got a lot better with Cook, but he runs the ball well as well. Again, the only play I look at, Mike, talk about Chris Jones pushing Dawkins into Allen. And I've seen that play a few times. To me, I just felt Allen was still strong enough to get that ball, to the end zone on that play. That was an underthrow to Shakir on that one, I believe it was. Khalil Shakir in the end zone. That was just the one I thought he had the chance to get it there, and he didn't.
Yeah, and that's certainly, I think, another example of just what the level is of expectation for Josh Allen in that game. Because, Dad, you look at the rest of the game, he did everything. For all the people that complained about Josh's playing style early in the season and what it was at the midpoint there, Josh gave you everything you wanted, supposedly, in this game. Josh Allen took what was there and what the defense gave him, especially underneath for the vast majority of that game. He was a value add to the rushing attack the way he had been down the stretch, and especially in the postseason. And he took care of the football. Outside of, and there was the fumble when he took off on a run late in the game that Spencer Brown ended up recovering. But outside of that, you saw him actively turn down some more dangerous throws because he was being cognizant of valuing the football. You can argue that's probably something you don't want to corral as much with Josh Allen because so much of that game plan was hyper conservative, and that's why a bad special teams decision to run the fake punt, a shank punt, and then the missed field goal can ultimately doom you because you wanted to play this game so close to the vest with your ground game where you were dominant for long stretches until you weren't, and then all of a sudden you had to break class in case of emergency and try and run the Josh Allen save us offense at the end of the game that fell short because you had a couple of receivers in key spots make bad plays, and then Josh missed the one big throw at the end of the game that people are going to harp on there. But largely another superhuman effort from that guy. There was a touchdown throw in that game where Josh broke contain, shimmy shook a linebacker for the Chiefs, and then threaded that ball into the corner of the end zone that maybe him and Mahomes can make and nobody else in the NFL. So I'm sorry, I can't do the weird Josh Allen discourse that came off that game. The guy's an incredible quarterback. They got other things they need to figure out around that roster to make sure that they go out and try and get this done while they can still physically get the things out of Josh that you get in the running game and otherwise.
Yeah, they got to keep their window open there, but if they get to a Super Bowl, it's going to be because of Josh. But a lot of people are saying if they don't, it's because of Josh, and I'm with you. I don't buy that. You have to look at it as well as competition. You got Kansas City and Mahomes. You have now a two-time MVP, or you will, in Lamar Jackson once he wins it, and a great defense. So there's pretty good competition in the AFC.
Yep, 100%. And that's always a factor in all this, but at a certain point, people don't matter, and they say if you're that good, you should be winning, you should be moving on more. We'll see if that prompts questions about the head coach, who's been at the subject of a lot of scrutiny in the course of this season. But let's. All right, we've got a little bit of breaking news here. This courtesy of Tom Pelissero at the NFL Network. A change in Green Bay. Joe Barry, their defensive coordinator, will not return next season, according to sources. Dad, this one's interesting because this was, I think, the prevailing feeling down the stretch of the regular season. But including the end of the year and the postseason that we saw, both playoff games, Joe Barry's group acquitted itself a lot better than I think I expected going into those matchups. You called their most recent one. How surprised are you by this?
Not. I mean, I thought this was coming. I mean, for most of the year, there had been some discontent on that side of the ball with Joe Barry and what he ran and the talent that he had on that side of the ball with man, zone, how he was playing things and how he was using personnel. It didn't seem to be fitting. And again, we know how this works. It's easy to change the one instead of the many, in the secondary. You had the highest paid cornerback in Jair Alexander, who went through some injuries, had the nice pick against the Cowboys, and a defense that was very shaky early on and did start playing better at the end of the season. But I deep down did not think it was going to be enough to save Joe Barry's job. I figured this one is not surprising to me, y'all. This I actually kind of expected.
No, and it'll be interesting to see the direction they go in this, because I think what you saw is when Jair Alexander was fully healthy down the stretch and in the playoff games, that was a team that Kenny Clark probably had one of the more underrated playoff stretches in these last two games of anyone we talked about through the wild card or divisional round in the pressure he was consistently applying. But they were able to bother one of the best offenses in the league in the San Francisco 49ers for the bulk of that game. So that's a group with a ton of first round talent. Jair Alexander, obviously their money guy in the secondary, but you look at the guys they've drafted all over the place, most recently guys like Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt up front, a lot of the Georgia contingency in that group. And Dad, a paramount hire for Matt LaFleur, knowing what they're building on offense right now. The young core over there that came in a lot less heralded than the group on defense that they were constantly drafting during the end of the Aaron Rodgers tenure. So a big time decision here for them to see if that team's going to remain one of the power players in the NFC going forward. Dad, while we're talking about people that are now out of the playoffs here, let's get to a few of our divisional round superlatives here and talk about the eliminated team that we're most confident in going forward. The most confident loser coming off this last weekend, Dad. Who should feel best about the performance they put out there as it pertains to going towards next season?
Well, I mean, I would say Green Bay, right? I mean, they took the number 1 seed and they lost by 3. They had a chance. They had the ball with a chance to go down and at least try and get a tie with a field goal. You had a tough throw by Jordan Love, a learning experience by him, throwing cross-body interception at the end. You know, the Texans got buried in the second half, but Baltimore's such a good team. But they're the biggest surprise, I think, to reach that far. Even though we were surprised at Tampa Bay making it to that divisional round, the Texans even making the playoffs, we were surprised because somebody was going to make it out of the NFC South. But I would say the team with the most potential, and I'm taking the Chiefs and the Bills. I'm taking the Bills out of it because we always put them as one of the top teams there anyway. I would say the Packers. You know, where Detroit clearly has that division in tow right now, the Packers, what they're building on offense, and then I agree with you, what Matt LaFleur is going to do with the defensive coordinator, I like what they're building there.
Yeah, I'm with you. The Bills didn't gain anything. Like, they didn't learn anything about themselves. Josh Allen's a space alien. They need more help in the receiver room opposite Diggs, and it's still Patrick Mahomes versus everybody else in that conference right now. So I'm with you there. I could throw C.J. Stroud up there, too, just because this year was such a revelation. I mean, one of the best rookie quarterback seasons we've seen in God knows how long, and seeing how far you still have to go against the top team in the AFC like Baltimore, I think is a good reminder coming off that year that there's still a lot of moves this Texans team has to make and a lot of maturing they have to do. That 11-3 penalty disparity that we talked about, pretty big there. Dad, let's go most important playoff duo left in this game. You've got Mahomes and Kelsey, obviously, for Kansas City. You could go Lamar Jackson, and I'd say anyone in his tight end room, namely Isaiah Likely right now. The Lions running back duo there with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, or I could even throw in their rookie pairing there with Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs. What do you look at as the most important duo left in the postseason?
Well, I mean, we've seen Mahomes pull magic, you know, out of his hat with other people than Kelsey, so you still give him the benefit of the doubt. We'll see about Deebo Samuel. Did not crack his shoulder, so we'll see about him playing. I would probably lean toward the Lions and the running backs. The 49ers had been a bit susceptible to the run. They did get Eric Armstead back for this last playoff game. That certainly helped them in the middle, but they had been a bit susceptible. So that 1-2 punch of Gibbs and Montgomery, not only running but catching the ball out of the backfield, I think is going to be huge to go along with Laporta and with St. Brown. But I would probably lean there. And if the Lions can get a game going with those two guys really get incorporated in that offense, I think that's going to be huge for them.
Yeah, that's the weakness right now. That's the Achilles heel for the 49ers. And Jahmyr Gibbs in the open field, breaking tackles. He's done a little bit of everything down the home stretch of the season. I would even go outside of Mahomes and Kelsey. For this game, I'd probably go Mahomes and Rashee Rice, basically the only other receiving option they've got, just because down the middle of Baltimore's defense ain't where you want to live. Travis Kelce's great, but Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, what that defense has done for the majority of the year in that area, that's going to be a tough matchup, and I'm sure there's going to be eyes on Kelsey because that's how opposing defenses have to approach the Chiefs first and foremost. And so can Rashee Rice do what he's done all year in finding room and especially run after the catch room in that offense? I think going to go a long way if they're going to pull what would be the upset against the number 1 seed. Dad, let's finish off with this one. Saddest ending in Buffalo in terms of tradition from this season. We've had the pizza parties that went on among the offensive line there. We had the sacrifice to the pit that had become popular over at the new stadium they were building. Apparently fans sacrificing themselves in the name of wins. We had Peppa Pig, who appeared in the Paramount Plus ad with Josh Allen, show up to the game. And then, of course, we had the win streak that had built up since the resurgent story about Sean McDermott's really problematic speech from 2019. Which are you going to be saddest to say goodbye to?
I got to believe the pit sacrifice, right? People just knowingly throwing themselves off like a plank on a ship, and just falling into snow. I mean, and to think that's it, that's doing it. I mean, I love fans. They are incredible on what they believe will help their team win. So that's pretty amazing to me. So I'll go with the pit sacrifice.
That one is the most on brand with the Buffalo Bills, especially because their fan base has so many traditions like that built into just getting to enter the parking lot for them. Part of me is going to miss Peppa Pig. I was glad we got to see the in-person mascot version of Peppa. That ad, for people that haven't seen it, and I'm not a shill for Paramount Plus. I don't even think I have Paramount Plus, quite honestly. I think that was kind of where I drew the line in terms of streaming services. But the commercials all time. And for me, I think it was Megatron saying silence Jim Nance in that commercial that I'm going to have internalized and used for meme material everywhere. But Peppa Pig there hanging out with the Buffalo Bills mascot, trying to upstage Taylor Swift as best Peppa could and failing there. I'm going to miss Peppa Pig.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. More coaching carousel news going around. Brian Johnson is out as the Eagles' offensive coordinator. The team interviewed Cliff Kingsbury on Tuesday to fill the role. Johnson is just the latest of Sirianni's staff to get the boot. The Eagles are also set to part ways with defensive coordinator Sean Desai, defensive play caller Matt Patricia, according to ESPN and multiple sources. Guys, what do we think of this staff overhaul for Sirianni? He's come under a lot of scrutiny for the Eagles' late season collapse here, and now, a lot of people are being shown the door.
Well, let you know that Nick Sirianni officially enters next year on the hot seat, Dad, because you and I both know once you fire all the coordinators, there's only one person left to blame at the top of this. You just gave Jalen Hurts all that money, so it ain't going to be him. So Nick Sirianni officially playing for his job for the majority of next season is my biggest takeaway from this. And are you surprised at all they decided to go this route and not just fire Sirianni, much in the same way we just talked about with the Milwaukee Bucks doing that with Adrian Griffin?
I mean, so you're looking at 2 years in a row, right? After losing, to Gannon and Steichen to the coordinators to head coaching jobs, now you fire these two. So you lose two to head coaching, and then you figure, okay, now it's kind of on you who you're going to bring in, and you are 10-1. Even though you don't look like 10-1, you are 10-1. You are what your record says you are. At least you're that. And then the bottom falls out, and now you fire your coordinator. So you got to try it again. So I'm with you. This next season, he is clearly going to be on the hot seat. So now you're going 3 years in a row with three different offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators, which is not the greatest thing in the world for any team, let alone a veteran team who is ready to win right now to be changing yet again. And the biggest kind of gripe here was while Brian Johnson was the OC, they didn't feel like it was his offense that was out there. Right, so there seemed to be that clash of Nick and Brian on what offense was going to be run, and that's the thing. I mean, what kind of head coach are you? Are you a CEO head coach that lets your O coordinator and D coordinator do their thing? Do you have your kind of fingerprints on everything? Which I get, you want to have your fingerprints on everything, but how much? How much so are you offering suggestions, or are you saying, no, don't do that, do this? I mean, there's that interplay of guys you put in charge as opposed to, how much you're mingling in there. And as a head coach, at the end of the day, Nick Sirianni's a head coach. And most head coaches say, you know what, if I'm going to go down with the ship, I'm going to go down making my decisions.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting how that plays in the rest of the locker room. I saw Jeremy Fowler reporting that there were a lot of people supposedly inside the building that weren't happy about how this went down. And this, Dad, coaching's an incredibly loyal business. And so the idea that you're churning through these guys or that the blame is being cast there, if it might have been some of Sirianni meddling, because to your point, going back to year one, there was the big to-do made when he turned over play calling midway through that season and gave way to a more run-heavy attack that ended up making them more successful. And so I wonder how much of the Nick Sirianni we see in public is the guy that we see in private, right? The guy that's like very emotional, very brash, kind of taunting other fan bases, doing the stuff that played really well for the fan base when they were winning, but I don't always think would make for great consistent leadership behind closed doors, right?
Yeah, and I guess now, and we've talked about this before, both of us having played, you deal with the assistant coaches much more than the head coach. So now you're giving your players on both sides of the ball, a veteran team, new coordinators now to deal with and new ways of basically doing business. And we'll see if any position coaches are in that fray as well, if coordinators want to bring in other guys or how that's going to work as well. But you're bringing in change. Change for you could see change for a bad team, but this is a good team that played very bad, right? And now you're bringing change in. And I get, change is inevitable in a lot of places, but yeah, this is squarely going to be on Nick on who he brings in and what he lets them do, especially on the offensive side of the ball. Because that's his side of the ball. So whatever coordinator he brings in, who knows? Maybe you'll want to call plays again. I don't know. But there's got to be that defined role, right?
Well, especially if things go wrong, you can see like that's the usual playbook for how this stuff goes is all of a sudden the head coach who's the coordinator on a certain side of the ball takes back over play calling when things get tough because he recognizes his job's on the line and he'd rather go down because he's swinging the bat himself than watching somebody else do it for him. But it feels like overall, Dad, the Eagles are at a really interesting inflection point right now where it feels like it's sitting on a knife's edge because think about what you're also going to lose this offseason. Potentially the retirement of Jason Kelce, who's one of the most important leaders on your team. Guys like Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham, I believe, are free agents heading into this offseason, who are the core of the Eagles roster that was there for the prior Super Bowl and then helped make the run last year, where now all of a sudden you're a locker room that's dealing with new voices at both coordinator spots. At the very least, some uncertainty about your head coach's command of the entire situation. And now you could potentially lose multiple of the most important leadership voices on both sides of the ball at this juncture right now where public confidence in your quarterback is at an all-time low. It really makes you wonder of it makes the premium paid on what the Eagles do through the first quarter of the season next year is going to be huge in determining the long-term output here at a place that we know has very emotional responses to what happens quickly in the fan base.
Yeah, and you think, you build a little bit in going to a Super Bowl and having some success. But, you're going to go into this season with a lot of these changes again. You're right, with a fan base that can get on you pretty quickly. But also, I think ownership, the Lowrys would see, you've got a really good team here that has really been underachieved this year. And if you start to do it again next year, there's not going to be a long leash on that.
No, it shouldn't. And I think in a weird way, they remind me a lot in some ways of the Los Angeles Rams from 2022, where they were, I think, just too injured at a certain point to party at some important places. And for the Rams in 2022, historic levels of injury along the offensive line. And with a quarterback like Matthew Stafford, who was then injured because of that, Aaron Donald got banged up. It was just a wash of a year. And I think by the end of the season, between injuries to your quarterback that had kind of persisted all year, injuries on offense with A.J. Brown not playing in that game, but the defense just decimated in the middle and the second level in a way that made them almost non-compete.
That's where I look at more as the offense, because the defense got decimated, right, in that back seven, just destroyed. And every team goes through injuries every year. It's how you deal with it. I get it. But they went through a lot. Offensively, I know Jalen was nicked up some, and A.J. just had missed that the playoff game. But, I mean, for the most part, they had all their weapons all year on offense, right? And it's so weird to say. They were 10-1. They were 10-1, yet nobody really felt confident about it. We just kept saying, kind of like with San Francisco, we kept or with Kansas City, well, they'll stop dropping the ball. They'll stop dropping the ball. Well, they're still dropping the ball some, but they're still winning. And in Philadelphia, we kept saying, oh, they're 10-1, but they're not playing that well. They'll get it. They'll get it. They'll get back to what they were, and they never did. They actually got worse than what they were. So I'm more interested on the offensive side of the ball, where they had less injuries than the defensive side of the ball, on how they're going to react next year. And the first thing has got to be, what's the relationship with Nick Sirianni and the offensive coordinator? Because to your point, to go look no further than Dallas. Mike McCarthy's like, my ass is on the line. I'm calling plays. Kellen Moore, we'll see you. This is my gig now. So I don't know where Nick's going to go. I don't know if Nick truly feels, and players and coaches usually know more than anybody else where the writing is on the wall. If he realizes that it might be the hot seat for him, he may say, you know what, I'm doing it. It's going to be on me. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
It's a good reminder, and we talked about this with Amin as it pertained to the Milwaukee Bucks in basketball. That old phrase, you are what your record says you are, not always true. And the 2023 Philadelphia Eagles and Buffalo Bills are the two most recent examples of that, where we all looked at those teams, one whose record said they were bad and one whose record said they were good, and said these two things do not feel the same at all. And that's part of analysis, is being able to see where the cracks are before they start to actually affect you. But this Philadelphia Eagles team, oversimplified on offense, offense and did not have the horses at time during the year to go out there and just beat people based on sheer will alone. How much is Nick Sirianni going to adjust is ultimately going to be the question that decides his future in Philadelphia. And from there, then it gets really complicated because you had Jalen Hurts trending in a really positive direction for a long time, played an incredible Super Bowl. You could argue outplayed the best quarterback in the NFL during that game. And by the end of the season, looked like a shell of himself. That's where it's got to start. What's the relationship with whoever's calling plays and Jalen Hurts look like, and rebuilding that?
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The 2024 MLB Hall of Fame class is set. Adrian Beltre, Joe Mauer, Todd Helton are officially going into Cooperstown. Guys, players need a 75% approval from voting members here. Beltre got 95.1%, Mauer 76.1%. Both of those two guys getting in on their first year on the ballot. Helton made it in his sixth attempt. He had 79.7% of the voting. So congratulations to these men. They are in.
They are in, Dad, and all very different paths. Like Jesse mentioned there, Todd Helton on the back end there. I think in a lot of people's mind, voters sort of always turned off by what goes on at Coors Field because of the altitude and all the differences out there in Colorado, but all very deserving, a really strong class here.
I like, you don't see it, I don't think won't see it as much anymore, is Mauer and Helton, both with one team through their entire career. Joe Mauer, by the way, I always wondered if he played football. This is a good size. He was like 6'5", 230. This was one hell of a big athlete. Won the batting title, I think, 3 times. Was the MVP in 2009. one of 6 catchers with 3 Gold Gloves and 3 Silver Sluggers. I mean, but his size, I always thought, man, this dude now, he picked the right sport to save his body a little more, even though as a catcher, you certainly can get beat up a lot. But man, that dude was an athlete for
Guys,
sure.
Joe Mauer, actually, fun fact, he's the first player in any of the 4 major sports, MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL history, to be drafted number 1 overall by a team from his birth state, play 15-plus seasons for that team, and reach the Hall of Fame. Very specific set of qualifications, but first guy to do it.
That is the most baseball stat of all time, where it goes through 8 different filters. As Brandon Newman, our great producer, would call that, that's an ESPN baseball stat for the ages there. So congratulations to him. I don't know what sign that puts him at or anything like that, but
this is an amazing Hall of Fame with you have to get to 75%, right? And you're just like Gary Sheffield got like 64%. It was his 10th and final year on the ballot. You know, you have X amount of time. We went through this with the steroid era guys as well when they weren't getting on, you know, Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and those about not getting on and how many years it takes. It's always very interesting. Beltre was easy. You know, as you said, 95%? One of 4 players, 400 homers, 3,000 hits, while getting 5 Gold Gloves. I mean, he was the no-brainer as well. But it's kind of a wild kind of Hall of Fame where, you know, you need those percentages and you see them going up each year and you put together how many years do I have left? Where's my percentage? How can I get my percentage to go up? Maybe it'll go up now because these guys went into the Hall, so now I'll get the votes. Kind of a wild thing to decide who's going in the Hall of Fame.
You're telling me baseball overcomplicated something with numbers? Yeah. I'm shocked.
God.
Stunned even.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, you mentioned the backdrop of all the steroid guys that they haven't let in a way that I think for a lot, especially casual fans, really devalues, not devalues, I should say, but sort of just a weird backdrop for every discussion of every Hall of Fame class, especially during the peak years when so many of those guys were denied access that were a huge part of our baseball life. Because that's what this all is. It's a nostalgia trip every time where you see the guys that were central figures in your childhood for one reason or another. And when so many of us saw our childhood denied, a lot of us looked at the Hall of Fame and the baseball writers, this high and mighty group of people that decided to wag their finger at an era that most of them profited off of, as sort of ridiculous.
It's a joke. And I've always said even guys in the steroid era should be in the Hall. Remember, the Hall is like a museum, right? And you can put in there that era if you want on a plaque. This era was no whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I'm tired of the people that were saying, remember the great McGuire-Sosa home run race. And people are like, oh, if we knew they were on steroids and we never would have watched. Oh, you're so full of it. You are so full of it that you wouldn't have watched. If we knew they were on steroids, because it wasn't very obvious when we were watching. Seriously. I mean, it's a joke how, and again, if you tested positive, you tested positive, but there were guys that didn't test positive and still are kept out of the Hall. But, if you test positive, you weren't going to get in with these writers. And the thought was it would change as the voting writers started to churn through and we'd get to a younger crew as opposed to the older crew, if that would change, but not soon enough, for the likes of Bonds and Roger Clemens, who absolutely should be in the Hall of Fame.
I can't, you know what it makes me nostalgic for now talking about all this, because we see so much of the NIL in college football right now being debated by Congress and all the rules being talked about as it pertains to the future of that sport. I miss having our baseball stars of old sitting up having to answer questions in front of Congress, sitting up there trying to lie through their teeth about their steroid use. Those were the glory days, man. Pictures of Mark McGuire finger wagging at Congress. That's the sport. That's the version of baseball I want back. People always talk about the mass appeal. There's no greater move for mass appeal of your sport than your players having to sit before Congress and ask about the drugs that they shot into their butt cheeks.
Yeah, that they said they didn't,
supposedly.
And you could tell they did and knew they did. I mean, my God, it was something. But I'm sorry, I don't want to hear it from the people that said I never would have watched it. I know, and I mean, give me a break. Just stop.
You mentioned Joe Mauer as both the #1 baseball and football prospect. I saw Dan Orlovsky, our colleague, tweet they were the senior in the same senior class coming out of high school. And Dan tweeted, he goes, "I remember Tom Lemming, who is one of the great recruiting analysts for all of us coming up, raving, saying this kid in Minnesota was the best player in both sports." In an era where we saw most recently a guy like Kyler Murray come closest to this kind of distinction, Joe Mauer, one of the OGs in that spot with the physical prowess at both. So congratulations to this 2024 Major League Baseball Hall of Fame class up there. While we're doling out congratulations, Dad, congratulations to friend of the program, Katie Nolan, on her third place finish on Celebrity Jeopardy. Last night going final there. Katie made a great run there. I believe $100,000 donation made to her charity that I'm going to pull up right now to make sure that I get right here. $100,000 donation to the Association for Women in Sports Media, the charity that she had been playing on behalf of there that helps create opportunities, both networking and otherwise, for women trying to get into sports media, which obviously very near to Katie, very near and dear to us. But Dad, in dramatic fashion last night, I appreciate Katie going out on her shield. She swung big on this in the name of trying to win and wasn't just going to sit idly by and let things happen.
She did, but it was Mo Rocca, I think that says Roca or Rocca, the guy who swung the biggest.
Swanging.
I don't know him. He's a journalist and a podcast host. And the other woman in it was Lisa Ann Walter, stand-up comedian. She was also in Parent Trap as well. I had a big role in Parent Trap. Very funny young lady. And going into Triple Jeopardy, it was Katie who had the lead. She was at over 19,000, and Roca was in last. He was at 10,000. And Lisa Ann Walter was right in the $14,000 range. And Roca, with about 4 categories left, got a daily double. It was a video daily double on like a $600 category. So not even one of the tougher, of the category. And he bet the whole amount, $10,000. And he got it right. So he took the lead. He got to 20,000. So by Final Jeopardy, it was 20,000, Katie with 10, and I believe Lisa Ann Walter with about 14. And the Final Jeopardy answer was the butler did it. That was the answer. And both Katie and Mo got it wrong. They were the first and second. They both got it wrong. Lisa Ann Walter got it right. She won $1 million for her charity was the Entertainment Community Fund, but she was stunned. Everybody was stunned that she was the only one who got this one right, came out of nowhere and won it. You mentioned Katie, $100,000, Mo got $250,000, but congrats to Katie. I mean, she was a stud through this. Absolutely fantastic through this thing.
An absolute machine. She put Steven Weber in a body bag in the last round here. That guy, I mean, give me a break with the way he acted on that show. And we heard and saw Pablo Torre finds out, apparently that was even spicier behind the scenes with what he was doing and the antics that he was pulling there. And Katie promptly stuffed him in that locker with the obituary joke that seemed harsh at the time until you know the backstory. Steven Weber, official enemy of the show on behalf of our friend Katie Nolan. I'm declaring that right now. Persona non grata around here. Katie Nolan forever. Dominant Jeopardy performance in the Celebrity Jeopardy rounds. All right, guys, time for this, that, the third. 3 quick stories to end the day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review us. Leave us a 5-star rating and try and catch us live if you can, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, here on the DraftKings Network, the DraftKingsNetwork.com, the YouTube channel. You can also find us streaming on Samsung TV Plus and Roku. And if you miss us at any of those spots or our great guests, big thanks to Amin Elhassan, NBA analyst here at the DraftKings Network and co-host of Oddball with Charlotte Wilder. Every day but Monday here on DKN. You can catch that wherever you get your podcast or right here on YouTube as soon as we get done with the show. And guys, let's get to this, that, and the third. We had breaking news courtesy of the New Heights podcast hosted by Jason and Travis Kelce of NFL fame. Over the weekend, we talked about the Bills-Chiefs game, and one of the images that no one will be able to get rid of is a shirtless Jason Kelce screaming out the window of the suite that he was in with Taylor Swift. Jason and his wife Kylie made the trip since the Eagles were eliminated, and a lot of people were wondering, was this the first time that sexy Batman had actually met what could be his future sister-in-law in Taylor Swift? And we got the answer today, courtesy of the podcast. Take a listen.
She was already telling me to be on my best behavior because we were meeting Taylor.
This is hilarious.
I was like, Kylie, when I met you, the first day I met you, I was blacked out drunk and fell asleep at the bar. This is part of the charm. This is part of the Jason Kelce charm. I want to make my best first impression. This is my best chance.
My best first impression is the worst impression ever, so I could just build
Set
from that
bar
point
nice
on.
and
Yeah,
low.
exactly.
The bar is on the floor. No, just kidding.
Wow.
You guys, we
Wow.
hoped and prayed that this was the first time they met. And the fact that it was is just, it's everything we could have dreamed.
I don't know if Jason Kelce could have grown any bigger in our eyes.
Yeah.
But he did. Because we asked that question. We were like, was that the first time they met? Couldn't be the first time they met. Because again, Kylie was in the booth. Jason's wife saw him shirtless doing his thing and just was like, ho-hum. Because as Jason said, the first time he met his wife, he was blackout drunk and fell asleep at a bar. This is who he is, man. I mean, I am so happy to find out that this is, hey, Taylor, nice to meet you. Excuse me, I got to go take my shirt off, chug a beer, and belch against a window and, slam my body against it. I mean, how awesome is this? This is the guy that's going to give the talk at their wedding. He is going to give the best man speech, probably without his shirt on by the time he gives it at this wedding.
I feel like
And
Taylor
also sobbing.
Taylor has had such dramatic relationships that have spawned a lot of, lyrics that are very angsty and dark and twisty. And it's like, girlfriend, how are you going to write about this one? Like, what? It's going to have to be an upbeat pop song. We're not going to be able to have some folklore style stuff about these guys.
I was gonna say everyone, I think immediately when it comes to Taylor Swift ex-siblings thinks of Maggie Gyllenhaal because the scarf referenced in All Too Well is the red scarf left at your sister's house, that song about Jake Gyllenhaal. I don't know what article of clothing is going to be left at Jason's house because he's not going to wear any. But Dad, this is also part of dating in your 30s. You got to find out answers a little bit quicker. You're old enough to know what you want. You're trying to figure out if this is going to be forever or if it's going to go down in flames. And in this case, that means, hey, you're going to have to get to know the family. And so why beat around the subject of Jason Kelce? Why try and actively have him be something he's not? You get full Jason all the time. It is full send with him. And I think that's actually in its own way helpful in the relationship process to know, am I going to be able to handle this or not? I have a ton of credit and respect for my brother-in-law, Ben Broniker, my sister's husband, who the very first time he met our family, he came down to South Bend on the weekend he was finding out whether he had a job or not in the NFL and met everyone in our family, all of Sydney's friends at the same time. And walking into that hornet's nest of insane people is no small task, but he knew on the other side of it, all right, I can survive that. That's going to be the same for Taylor here.
Yeah, that was a hell of a test. That's for sure. I remember that weekend. The thing, how about for Taylor Swift? What a different crew she's hanging with now, what she's been used to, right? From the entertainment world to hanging around football players and kind of the football environment, and then that going on in a suite. Got to be a breath of fresh air for her, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Gotta be a ton of fun.
Amazing. Also, just really quick, had to add that Jason Kelce shared that tweet he tweeted a screenshot of his phone that someone had texted him that his daughter had said, "Daddy's boobies are showing," because she saw the pictures of him out. And I just thought that was the funniest thing that I had seen in a while, because kids say the darndest things.
Yeah, listen, for that kid, it's another day that ended in Y. Daddy showing his boobies.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Everyone there, not surprised. Taylor Swift learning the drill very quickly. Guys, let's get to that. This popped up on my radar yesterday thanks to a tweet from T-Pain, who, by the way, T-Pain, listen, our people are reaching out, really want to have you on the show, cultural icon, important figure in my life. And one of the people that's in the lineup for Lovers and Friends Fest, Dad, a concert taking place Saturday, May 4th in Las Vegas that happened last year too. So this is a real event because a lot of people were questioning, based on the lineup for this, how this could be possible. The lineup includes artists such as Janet Jackson, Lil Wayne, Nas, Ludacris, Nelly, Akon, Neo, Usher, Snoop Dogg, Alicia Keys, Mary J. Blige, Ja Rule, T-Pain, The Backstreet Boys, Gwen Stefani, Nelly Furtado, Ciara, TLC, MIA. I mean, Dad, you're getting down into the fine print on this with artists like David Banner, Lil Flip, Plies, Juvenile, Paul Wall, Twista. The fact that they're going to have all these people in one place presents the biggest logistical nightmare of a challenge for any concert goer. Because, Dad, you got to decide who you're going to leave on the cutting room floor when you go and attend this show.
So I don't know about this concert. Is it a weekend? Is it a few days?
It's like Coachella.
That is one day. It is May 4th.
Wait, they're all going to play in one
day?
day? How long do they get to play? 5 minutes? I mean, when this thing would have to start at 5 in the morning for
I actually
everybody to play.
didn't realize that it was just one day. It's one day.
Oh my
It
gosh.
is Saturday, May 4th. So you got, like, this is basically the musical soundtrack of my entire life up and through college.
Wow.
Like, all of these artists in some way, shape, or form have influenced and impacted my life here. And so I have to make a decision, like, am I going to go see Lil Wayne, where the Carter 3 was the soundtrack for my first summer in college, or the Backstreet Boys, whose Millennium album ushered me through my time in middle school?
Or Akon. Akon's going to be there. We were just talking about him.
Akon,
Wow,
I mean, shout out to my buddy Kyle Rudolph, probably his favorite artist during college and something that was on repeat in our apartment that we lived in.
That's it. Now, again, I don't know the venue. They got to have multiple stages, I would imagine, as well, because you're doing so much changing as well. One day, all these groups, that is, Mike, you got to go to this.
I have to. At GoJo and Golic on Twitter, build your dream day. You've got to pick, I'll say 5 artists from Lovers and Friends Fest. So the only ones that you can see throughout the course of the day. Send us your dream concert weekend at this show. I have to get there. You're absolutely right, Dad. We're going to find a way to see if we can also do it on DraftKings dime. Somehow this could be content. Let's talk tax after this. In the meantime, let's get to the third. We had the Oscar nominations come out the other day, and the Oscars already have such a poor reputation of representation at this award show, and really missed the plot. Barbie, one of the biggest movies of this last year, part of the Barbie and Oppenheimer phenomenon that got so many people back to the theaters. A movie about female empowerment, representation, the difficulty of being a woman in the modern world. Saw snubs and nominations for Margot Robbie, the film's lead, and Greta Gerwig, the film's director, while Ryan Gosling was nominated for his role as Best Supporting Actor in this movie. Dad, they took the Barbie movie and essentially nominated the only dude from it there. Now, America Ferrera also received a nomination, and that shouldn't go unnoticed. But talk about reinforcing the reason why this movie was made. Oscars, you should be ashamed of yourselves. This is ridiculous. Justice for Greta.
I don't think this movie.
Yeah.
I liked the movie. I wouldn't give it any Oscars.
I'm not really outraged. No. I hear what you're saying. Greta Gerwig turned this into a monster, so if anybody should have been nominated, I think it should have been her. But I'm sorry. Like, I think it's a great movie with a great message, and I enjoyed it, and I enjoy the message, obviously. But I don't think this is like an Oscar-worthy
I don't either. I think it was a nice movie. Nice. Greta, I think, is the one. I agree on that. But yeah, I didn't go, oh my God, I can't believe they got snubbed the way they did. No,
shame on you guys. This movie brought people back to the theaters. This is why you guys in the coastal elites want to keep this and movies like Top Gun away from winning awards for being good films that people actually like. Greta Gerwig, Margot Robbie, you guys are Kenuff for me and should have been for the Oscars. If we were Kenuff, download, subscribe, rate, review us. We'll talk to you tomorrow.